Well, hello everybody, welcome to my channel. My name's Louise Savage and this is my channel, Louise Savage Muses, in case you hadn't realised. And welcome back if you're returning, that's just joyous. So I've recently had a half-term holiday, which is very lucky, I know. And I just wanted to share my small but perfectly formed little book haul from my travels. I just love having time to mooch around bookshops, and I'm trying really hard not to buy many books because I just have loads. You know, and I don't know, paper. There's so many reasons, aren't there, why I shouldn't be filling my house with books, but there we are. Couldn't resist these. So the first two are books that I picked up in one of our local charity shops, visited with my sister. And some of these, there's a local hospice here called the Kemp Hospice. No, wrong, St Richard's Hospice. And they have these charity shops where the book sections are almost like, it's like walking into Waterstones. They just display the books beautifully. And they're so reasonable. I mean, the top one here, I paid £1.50, which is not, I mean, what can you buy for £1.50 these days? Anyway, so had a really good mooch in there and tried not to buy anything and failed because the excuse for being there was being with my sister, but hey. It's The Quarry by Damon Galgut, who won the Booker Prize last year with his book The Promise. And I haven't even read that yet, so I don't know why. I don't know why I'm picking up another of his books, but it just really grabbed me. The blurb on the back tells me that it's about a sort of chance encounter between two men. Well, I say encounter, some sort of conflict. They don't know each other. They bump into each other on a road and one of them ends up dead. And I thought, crikey, that sounds like the beginning of, well, not the beginning, but the sort of story behind Oedipus Rex. So immediately I was kind of enticed by that. But then when I learned that the killer, in inverted commas, decides to take on the identity of the victim, I got really, really intrigued. So I'm very, very much looking forward to reading this. And I haven't read anything of his before, but I think this is exactly the sort of book I want to be curling up with right now. Can't speak. By the way, apologies, it's a bit gloomy in here. Unfortunately, it goes dark very early now, and I can't film in daylight, so I've tried to eliminate as much darkness as possible, but there we are. I hope I'm not looking too gloomy. The second book I picked up in the lovely hospice shop was Marilynne Robinson's Housekeeping, and again I read Housekeeping. Thought it was Homecoming. That was a previous one I read, and I think she is just the most fantastic writer. I love the way that she writes about the small things, and she can fill a page with words where very little happens and yet everything happens. So this novel is a story about two sisters who I think are orphaned, and I don't, you know, there isn't very much on the back of this book about the plot, because I suspect that there may not be much of a plot. But these two girls end up with their mother's sister, I think, growing up with her after being passed around from various people. And it sounds as though, you know, their sort of awakening to adulthood is quite traumatic. I think this is a book about loss. And again, you know, it's a sort of, what's the word? It's such a human theme, isn't it? We all lose people, we all lose things. Every day we're losing time. Well, that sounds a bit gloomy, doesn't it? Sorry. But you know, I think I'm going to really enjoy this one too. And then last week I was up in Glasgow, and we went on a day trip to Stirling, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Stirling. While we were there, I'd sort of checked in advance that there was a bookshop, and indeed there was, and it was called the Book Nook, and it was the most wonderful bookshop. I don't think I've ever walked into a bookshop in a town. The shop itself is not huge. It's not tiny, but it's not huge. There was such a bustle in there. It was wonderful. There were a sort of, I don't know, about 10, 12 coffee tables. And there were people sat at every single one, of all ages, all genders, you know, identifying in all sorts of wonderful ways. It just felt a really magical place. The staff were really friendly. It seemed like a real kind of community hub. And again, they had such an amazing choice of books. You know, when you're in a shop and there were lots of books that I'd read, but also lots of books that I'd didn't know existed. And the first one is an example of that. So this is The Kiss by Joan Lingard. Now, Joan Lingard is a writer whose children's books I've read. I think I've only read one of her other adult novels, and I don't think it particularly set me on fire, I have to be honest. But I do like the way she writes. I love the way she writes to children. And this novel is about an art teacher who tries to sort of transmit his passion for art to his students, but without an awful lot of success from what I can gather. And he ends up taking a school trip to Paris, and one of his students completely falls in love with the sculptor Rodin. Now, I've been lucky enough to go to Paris a couple of times, and one of my favourite spots is the Rodin Museum. I just think it's stunning. I love sort of small museums with small collections, and you really get a feel for the artist. So immediately I'm there, you know. I don't really need to know much more. It's written by Joan Lingard. It's inspired by Rodin's The Kiss. I think it sounds as though it explores the darker side perhaps of sexuality. I think that some relationship is going to emerge, or some sort of conflict with this young girl and her much older teacher who is married. So I think there might be some sort of love triangle type thing. I don't know. But, and also just look at the cover. I mean, you know, you would, wouldn't you? And then another story about a teacher. I don't quite know what that says when I'm on half term, but there we are. Now I picked this one up, well, A, because it was bright yellow, so it just leapt out at me. But more because it's written by Alison Moore, and I read The Retreat recently, which is one of her novels, and really, really loved it. This one is called He Wants, and this is about a retired teacher. He lives, I don't know where he lives, in his own home still. His daughter visits him every day and gives him soup. He doesn't really want soup. He would much rather be down the pub. So I think it's, you know, it's probably focuses a bit on the ageing process from the sounds of it, and maybe the dynamics between ageing parent and daughter, which I think is an interesting subject matter. As an ageing parent myself, I think I need to read and learn. So there's that, but also it sounds like it may have a little bit of a sort of slightly humorous, fun element to it. I'm kind of hoping, I don't know. And I think it frames around him encountering an old friend who he's not seen for years and years, and that kind of somehow makes him reframe his life a little bit. So very much forward to reading that one too. And today I look at that. I don't know if you can see it, but it's just a beautiful little bookmark. I went to have my hair done this morning and popped into a local indie bookshop to buy a present for somebody else, as you do. But I ended up also buying a present for myself. And I was just, I hope you're as thrilled by this as I am, some of you out there. Please let me know if you are, because when I was reading as a child, sort of, you know, 10, 11 years old, 9, 10, 11 years old, and my sister too, actually, one of our absolute favourite books, we must have read it over and over again, was a book called Black Hearts in Battersea by Joan, Aiken. And also there's the wonderful Wolves of Willoughby Chase, which I think I talked about in one of my nostalgia rambles, or musings, I should say. Musings sounds a little bit more sophisticated than ramblings, doesn't it? Anyway, I did not know. I don't know, why have I never thought to look to see whether she wrote for adults? Duh. So this is a novel by Joan Aiken called Trouble with Product X. And she wrote this, I think, in 1966. I don't know if you can see it very well. It sounds absolutely brilliant. In fact, I'm so excited. In fact, the Sunday Times has simply written brilliant on the back. I think she died in 2004. And I think her novels have been perhaps recently republished. In fact, I'll be able to tell you. Just let me put my coffee down. Bear with me a second. Get my goggles on. There we go. Teacher look. And yeah, the Sunday Times say brilliant. When was it originally? It was originally published in 66. Oh, come on, Louise. Yeah, 2022. So it looks as though maybe she's having a resurgence, which is just amazing. Anyway, listen to this. I just think it sounds fantastic. Martha works for a London-based advertising agency, so a trip to the stunning Cornish coast to film a TV commercial should be the perfect break from her rather complicated personal life, or don't we all have one of those? The client is the eccentric owner of a chemicals company that has invented a new, almost irresistible perfume. I don't know if any of you have read Perfume by Patrick Suskind, but that's one of the best openings to a novel I've ever read. Martha is in charge of shooting the romantic ads, unfortunately starring his beautiful but highly manipulative daughter-in-law. So the relationships all sound quite quirky and complex. Now this is the best bit. Before long, Martha finds herself embroiled in the conspiracy over the perfume's true origin. To say nothing of a kidnapped baby, sinister monks, her long since vanished ex-husband, and a series of exploding soup cans. And what of her own floundering love life? Well, I mean, I just couldn't believe that. The only criticism I would have, and I've not read it yet, is the typeface that they've used, the font that they've used. I don't know if you can see, it's tiny. I think it's probably the original font. So I think they've probably done it to sort of, you know, what's the word? Give it that retro feel, which it perhaps deserves. But for me, that's a little bit off-putting. If it hadn't been Joan Aiken and hadn't had such a good blurb on the back, I don't think I would have bought it. However, the typeface does take me back to reading Walls of Willoughby Chase, because I'm sure it's the same typeface. I don't know. I wouldn't gamble on it because I'm not a gambler, but yeah. And it looks as though one of the things about those novels that I loved as a child was just the wryness of them. You can see that Joan Aiken's writing with a real twinkle in her eye, and her creation of characters and motivation is just marvellous. So I'm a very happy lady today with my lovely book haul. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that it won't be too long, because sometimes, I don't know about you, I'll buy a book and it stays on my shelf for 6 months, 12 months, 10 years before I actually sit down to read it. But I hope I'll be reporting back on some of these soon, because they look like gems. Anyway, take care, enjoy your week, see you soon, bye.